And they all lived happily ever after. The end. That's how many transplant stories go, but unfortunately, not all of them.
I went into it again, I'm healthy, my kidney's fine, we're a match. Why wouldn't it work?
That's living kidney donor Markie Campbell. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and your host for this edition of The Journey Continues. Hi, Markie. Could you describe yourself for us in an elevator pitch?
I honestly have never been asked to do that since interviewing for a job, so this is going to take me a second. I think that if I had to describe myself, I am very outgoing, but also love to be inside. I'm a homebody. I am happy on the couch with my dogs, but I also love people interaction. So I'm definitely, when I'm out and I'm thrilled to be out. And when I'm in, I'm like, I'm good. Couch, home, dogs. That is a good life for me. I think I care. I want to be there for others. Mostly it relates to dogs, but obviously based on this conversation, I think you'll hear it occasionally translates to people too.
Well, let's talk about dogs. You fostered more than 65 dogs in need of adopters over the last 5 years. That is a lot of dogs. What inspired you to start doing that?
So we moved to Atlanta, Georgia about 6 years ago, and I didn't start working right away. So we moved here for my husband's job, and so I didn't have a job right away. I was sort of sitting at home doing nothing. I did that I was going to make some goals for myself, work out more regularly, learn a new skill. I learned how to knit for a minute, and give back was one of mine. And I have always been an animal person, but I was mostly a cat person.
Oh,
I met my husband and I had a cat, and then he was a dog person. So when she passed, I agreed we would try a dog. And we rescued Spartacus, who was our first dog, up in New York. And so much of what you hear is hard. So when we moved down here, I was like, okay, I'm going to give back. There's an animal shelter not far from here. I'm going to start volunteering. I'm going to try. At first, I just volunteered. And then the shelter sort of put out a mass request for people to foster because they had gotten in a number of dogs above their normal capacity. So I was like, okay, well, we can just do it for a little while. It'll be fine. So we fostered our first dog, Fern, who we ended up adopting because ask anybody, but normally if you foster your first dog, that's now your dog.
right.
You're not yet prepared for the idea that you're going to let them go.
Right.
But then after that, we just sort of kept going. I would help other people, just do a little temporary fostering if somebody went out of town, just eased ourselves back into it. We just kept going. And, every time, we've had some that you think, I'm never getting you adopted. You're just now our dog. And some where I'm like, oh, it's so easy to get you adopted. I'm sure it'll be really fast. So yeah, and my husband's been amazing the whole time. I mean, we definitely, have our chaotic moments, but he's supportive. I've called him a few times where I'm like, hey, I'm driving. I have a puppy in the car. So can you get everything ready? He's like, what?
Surprise.
Surprise, puppy. But no, it's been a up and down, and but overall it's wonderful to see these dogs in great homes, and mostly not mine.
Yeah.
For the long term.
So obviously fostering helps the dogs. What does fostering do for you? How does it make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel good that I can see these dogs really blossom into a real dog. Seeing them in the shelter is hard, and being able to see them interact with other dogs, interact with us, just get a bed and be able to sleep soundly with no terrible noises happening around them, I think for me is really a big deal. I don't have a type, like whatever dog is needed. I mean, people will tell you I have a type. It's puppies or old dogs. Those are sort of my spectrum of dogs. But right now we have a 2-year-old foster, so it's not. I have no type. It's the dogs that speak to me in some way or are really in need is where we end up going.
Because you foster, you and my sister volunteer together at the shelter there, and she very kindly shared on her Instagram an episode of this podcast that you messaged her and said, "Hey, I'm a living kidney donor." And so that's how we got connected, which was very cool. So I'm sure listeners are probably like, "Why are we talking about dogs? This is a kidney podcast." But this is where we're going somewhere with it. So so you are a living kidney donor. Can you tell us a little bit about your friend that you donated to and how you learned she was in need of a donor?
Yeah, absolutely. I was living in Connecticut working, and this is about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, making friends like normal 30, 29-year-olds do. And I had a really good friend who I knew she had some health issues. Again, I was a stupid late 20-year-old, very self-absorbed, I'm sure, and unaware of what was happening around me. So I knew she had some health issues, but I certainly didn't understand the scope of it. I knew she needed a kidney eventually. Again, good friend of mine, but didn't register what that meant. And so she was talking to people. She had another friend who was getting tested, and that fell through at some point. And then all of a sudden, she went on dialysis. She hadn't been on dialysis yet. And I think it finally hit me what that meant and what was happening. Again, naive 29-year-old at the time, I was like, oh, I'll just get tested. I mean, I'm sure I'm not a match. We're not family, I'm sure I'm not a match, but I'll get tested just in case. Like, you never know. So I went and I got tested, and I was a match. So our blood type matched, and apparently you need a certain number of markers in order to be considered a match. And I had enough markers with her to match.
Well, what did you know about kidney disease or transplantation at all before any of this happened?
Absolutely nothing. Whatever you see on TV and movies, honestly,
Okay.
I had zero understanding of what was happening. Looking back now, I think was probably best that I sort of went into it a little bit blind, because I think I would have been much more nervous and hesitant had I known what I know now back then.
What did your family and friends think when you told them you were going to do this?
They were not in agreement with it. They all definitely took the route of, well, what if? What if you have a kid who has a kidney disease? What if you get married and your husband needs a kidney? What if you have some sort of kidney problem later in life and need your second kidney? I won't say they weren't supportive. They were not on board with my decision and voiced their disagreement with it. I do remember having the conversation with, a few of my family members and basically saying, I'm a really healthy person, so the chances that I have a kidney disease are slim. I hadn't met my husband yet, so I was like, maybe I'll choose my husband based on his kidney health. Like, that's fine. I can try that. And I didn't have kids. Again, I sort of said, I go, on the off chance that they have a kidney disease, I'm not holding on to this when I have someone right in front of me who needs it. And if I hadn't been a match, I would have walked away ultimately, right? Sorry, I wasn't a match, but I was. I honestly don't even remember making the decision or thinking about it. I went, I got tested, I was a match, and I said, okay.
I think that's a good philosophy to have in life, no matter what the what ifs are. Why am I sort of banking on something that might happen in the future when I have an opportunity right here in front of me? I think that's a very present way of living. I love that. So, what was surgery day like for you and your friend?
Well, it was very early. We had the very first surgery of the day. My mom came in to help me. So she and I went to the hospital and got checked in, got ready. I really remember, it's so funny. I remember the surgeon coming in and signing his name on my side,
Oh,
because they come in to confirm like who you are and all of your information. And then they sign their name on the side of your body, I guess, that is the kidney. Again, it
okay.
was a little bit of a blur, but I remember that so vividly. He came in and signed my side.
So you kind of felt like a Cabbage Patch doll with a
Definitely did. I was like, okay, this is weird. Please cut the right side. Thank you. Then, they wheel you in and the anesthesiologist says, okay, count backwards from 100. And I feel confident I made it to like 97. And that's all I remember. I do remember, though, leading up to the surgery, there's a number of steps you have to take once you've decided you're a match and once you've decided you're going to donate. One of which is regular blood work and a psych evaluation, especially for living donors. They want to make sure that you are of sound mind making these decisions. I just remember it was such a funny, again, looking back, but even in the moment, such a funny conversation. But I do think important. I don't think it registered again for me at the time. I was like, yeah, I'm making a decision. I'm a sound mind. I'm a smart person. I get it. But I understand it. I'm almost glad that I had it, almost to feel extra confident that I was making the right decision and making a smart, sound decision at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want anybody to undergo a major surgery and then later be like, I didn't know what I was signing up
Right.
for. I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, so it makes sense that they do that. And I've heard other donors say you have up until you do that countdown from 100 to say, I've changed my mind, because they
Right.
want to make sure you're going into this willingly, confidently.
Yes.
So was it smooth sailing right away for your friend after the donation?
No, it wasn't. So I woke up in recovery and we had our surgery in New York City. So we were at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. I woke up in recovery and her bed was sort of near mine. We weren't next to each other, but we were sort of near each other. And she had a lot of complications following the surgery. And they didn't have a room for me right away. So they kept me in recovery much longer than expected. It was definitely a weird experience right after the surgery. So, probably the first week after the surgery, she had a lot of complications. She had to go back in for another surgery. It wasn't taking, there was a hernia issue. She had a number of complications that came along with the surgery as a whole. And then for me, I remember they moved me a number of times. So from different rooms to different beds, which I don't know how much your listeners are aware of sort of what the surgery entails, but 13 years ago, it was a pretty massive cut to your body. And so moving a lot is hard, even with the number of drugs I'm sure I was on. But they moved me a lot. Sometimes I was near her, sometimes I wasn't near her. It was hard. It's hard to sleep in a hospital. You're not fully aware of what's going on. They didn't really want visitors, so they sort of kicked my mom out a bunch. So she couldn't be with me. I don't think some of the nurses understood, because when you're in recovery, I think you're one of many. It's not
Right.
just
People from
kidney
all kinds of
recovery.
surgery. Yeah.
Right. I don't think they fully understood what kind of surgery I had had. At one point, I asked for ice chips, and the nurse goes, well, I'll get them for you this time, but you're going to have to get up and get them next time. And I was like, pretty sure I can't walk for like a week. So, yeah, it was very interesting waking up to this sort of, I don't know what's happening. I'm not in a comfortable space. You got to have somebody comforting there. And my mom was nowhere to be found half the time because they kept moving her, moving me. And yeah, my friend had some real complications afterwards that she stayed in the hospital a month.
Oh, wow.
I was there a week, which was even longer than I think normal recovery. They said I should expect to be there about 2 or 3 days. I ended up being there 5 days and they wanted to keep me longer. And I said no.
So how did that feel for you with when your friend's having all these complications? And did the kidney, you said it took a little while for the kidney to start working. How did that feel for you as the donor?
It was really hard. Again, I don't think I really realized what if it doesn't work. I went into it again, I'm healthy, my kidney is fine, we're a match. Why wouldn't it work? So the kidney didn't actually start working for her for probably 3 months. She didn't have to go back on dialysis, which was great, but they knew that it wasn't working the way that they would have expected it to. I think the hard part was I knew the days she had bad days because I didn't hear from her. On good days, I heard from her. She would send me updates. And on bad days, I didn't hear from her. So I knew they were bad days anyway. And there was nothing I could do. And I couldn't help anybody else. It wasn't like, okay, well, it didn't work, give it to someone else. That was it. It was a rough couple of months, really realizing my limitations, how little I could do quickly, how much pain you're in. I mean, the pain was at a level that I'm not even sure I have understood since. And it was hard knowing that it may not have worked. But luckily, at around 3 months, we named my kidney Sleepy because he just kind of slept for a couple of months. But Sleepy woke up and she got 13 years with him.
So how is she doing now?
So she found out last year that he stopped working.
Okay.
So she is back on the list for another kidney. And again, she'd had other health issues. So I think there are some other things going on, but she's back in the same position, which is also really hard. It's been nice knowing for 12, 13 years that she's good, kidney's working. That's one less thing she has to worry about. And now she's back to square one a little bit. And there's nothing I can do.
Right. You've already given your one extra
Right.
kidney
My one
to, yeah.
extra.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did your friendship evolve or change over the last 13 years as a result of the donation?
I don't know that I would say as a result of the donation. I think it just evolved, changed because our lives changed just over time. She moved out of the area. I eventually moved out of the area. We've been in so many different places. Just based on that, our friendship and our lives have changed so much. But I would not say it was actually because of the surgery that had, I think it was more just life in general.
Mm-hmm.
As I think we have with so many of our friends, you have them in a specific point in your life. And then as things change and as you move in different places and they move in different places, you become distant in different ways and mostly location wise, but that day to day changes. But I will say if I had another kidney to give, I'd still give it to her. So if there was
Okay.
3 in there, I would do it. So that hasn't changed in any way.
I was going to ask that actually. Yeah. Do you think if you could donate again, you would? Especially knowing your experience with recovery being hard and it being sort of disappointing that it's not taking right away. I think that speaks really highly of the donation process and what it feels like to be a donor that you would donate again.
I think that's just it. I think knowing what it is now, I would donate again if I had an extra kidney to give. I would donate again because I know it. I know what to expect. I know what that looks like. And even on the chance that it doesn't work, I think the chance that it does work matters. And that's sort of what I tried to think about. I think the first time I donated, being unaware was better for me at that point in my life. And now I think that I'm older and I like to pretend wiser. I think I would still donate just because I do know and I understand the magnitude of what that means for somebody, even for 13 years.
Yeah.
I like to think that she appreciated that time and doesn't regret that my kidney only gave her 13 years and maybe somebody else would have given her more, but hopefully that's not the case. And, she's happy with that time. I just feel bad that it didn't last longer. It's an overall thing about kidneys in general and kidney donation. They don't last forever.
Right. I think you can feel very proud of 13 years. That's 13 years and that's time that she didn't have to be on dialysis. I'm sure, obviously, I don't want to speak for her. I don't know her at all, but
Yes.
I think you can feel proud of 13 years. But how did it feel when she told you that the kidney failed and it was no longer working?
It was surprising and hard. I was sad when she told me. I was sad for her. I was sad for me. I was sad that I couldn't give her longer, that my organ, which I thought, again, I was 30 years old. I'm sure it's a great organ. That it wasn't stronger. It didn't do more. But I was really sad when she told me. It was a tough week finding that out. And then I felt sad for her because how hard that must be. I just have to deal with the sadness of it didn't last as long as I would have expected, but she actually has the next step of now what for herself, for her body, for her health.
What sort of support was available to you then as a donor, now as a donor? Have you found support?
I mean, I won't say I found official support. I didn't join any groups. I didn't, when I hear people, which is how I did get connected to you, when I see people or hear people that I might know talk about donation and talk about organ donation and talk about it, I'm always like, oh, did you donate? Are you a recipient? Tell me more. But I didn't join any groups. Nothing like that. I think, at the time when it happened, I had great support from my mom, my aunt, and friends in the area who were amazing, to the point of meeting me and my mom when I came home from the hospital to help walk me up the stairs to my apartment because I couldn't do it by myself,
Hmm.
and bringing me Netflix DVDs and setting up what I needed to be at home for 2 months straight. I had friends who came into town, cooked me meals that I could just heat up. So I didn't have to do any work. I didn't have to put any effort into my life at the time, which was really amazing. And when I found out it didn't work, my husband here has been great. My mom, again, who has been here, been with me for the whole time, supporting me in that way. But it was hard. It's always interesting and again, I don't seek them out, but when I do meet people who have had a similar experience or who understand, it's a different conversation, and it's a little cathartic to be able to talk to people who actually know what you're talking about and
Hmm.
actually understand it. I love my husband to death, but he doesn't get it. If you haven't been there, you don't understand it.
I think that's a really good point, and that's part of why we do this podcast, is to help people connect and hear stories that where they can put themselves in those shoes. And I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be waiting for a kidney or to donate a kidney, or we want people to hear themselves reflected.
I do think it's amazing when there is an opportunity for that community to be able to have someone you can relate to or a situation that you can relate to that's so specific. Because even though I know that there are so many people on a donor list, the truth is I think living donors are much smaller. That space is much smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. What, if anything, would you do differently if you could go back in time to January of 2011?
I don't know that I would do anything massively differently. I think I would still donate. I would still be a part of that. I think I might have prepared myself a little bit better to be my own advocate, I think was a hard part. Again, this both at the time that it happened. So in 2011, the internet was a thing, but there weren't community Facebook groups about people donating kidneys. It wasn't the same thing. And I think I would have been more my own advocate. I think there was a trust in our doctors that we wanted to have, and nurses and all of the hospital staff, that looking back now, I should have been stronger to push for what I needed, what I was feeling, what my body was telling me. So I ended up leaving the hospital on a Friday. So I think our surgery was Tuesday morning. I left on Friday. They wanted to keep me through the weekend because they felt like I was developing pneumonia.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
remember saying to them, I'm getting sicker here. I didn't have pneumonia before I came here. I'm getting sick here. I need to go home. And my mom, was the doctor knows what they're talking about. You have to listen to the doctor if they think you should stay here. And looking back, of course, I also think you're a mom looking at your child in a hospital bed. That could not have been easy for her. So,
Right.
I do feel bad now about that. But she was very much, you need to listen to the doctor. The doctor knows best. If they think you should stay, you should stay. And I finally said, I'm not staying here anymore. You tell me what I need to do to get you to release me today, but I'm leaving this hospital. And they told me I had to walk up and down a flight of stairs.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you better believe I did it, though. I was like, this is happening. We're doing this. And I even think back to, again, small things. They gave you a lot of jello, as most hospitals do. Every once in a while, you got frozen jello, like really icy cold jello. And sometimes you got warm, gross jello. And I loved the ice cold Jello because I just wasn't in the mood to eat real food yet. So the Jello was just so nice. And some nurses were amazing where they kind of sneak you the really icy cold Jello. And some just were very, here's the Jello you get. Again, I think this is a moment where I should have the things that I want because I'm the one laying in the hospital bed. Forget the donor part. I'm the one laying in a hospital bed. So if it's not going to affect my health, maybe give me the small, tiny, tiny wins that I can get, which is cold Jello. So I would say, I wish I had been a little bit more of an advocate for myself, pushed a little bit more on the things that made me feel better in those moments, even as something as small as cold Jello. So I will say, I don't regret the donation. I don't regret any of that, but I wish I had pushed more for what I needed and what was important to me for the time that I was there. And I hope anybody listening to this takes that and says, yes, what makes me happy in the moment? And if it's cold Jello, you ask for cold Jello because that's important.
Absolutely. My next question was what advice you have for other potential living donors. It sounds like be your own advocate for sure. What else would you recommend?
It's going to sound very cliche, but be prepared that it's not going to work and give yourself the grace and have the support system around you to be there on the bad days because a lot goes to the recipient, which is important. They're the sick one. They should absolutely get it. But the donors need it too. It's one of the reasons I think that's important, which I, again, didn't realize at the time, but we had our own team of doctors. So her doctors were different than my doctors because they wanted each of us to have our own team and not have to be pulled between us. So I had my own doctors, my own people, both surgery and afterwards. She had her own doctors, her own surgery team separate of mine. And I think that is a really important thing. And I think same thing if it's family, which I assume most living donors are, family probably feels pulled in multiple directions. You want to support the recipient. You want to make sure that they're getting what they need, but the donor also needs support and needs that space to be sad too. Even if it does work, you're sad too. There are moments where you're still sad or you're still in a lot of pain or you still need somebody to help you do something. And recognizing that and making sure that there are people who are dedicated just to you, I think is really important. And if you can advocate for that, you should. Because if you're already giving an organ to somebody, you're probably someone who is normally going to say, I got it. It's okay. Go worry about the other person. And it's important to say, nope, I need help too. I need somebody here too.
I think that's such great advice. And you're really good at segueing me into my next questions. So you gave your friend 13 years with a kidney. You've given over 65 dogs a chance at life. Who takes care of you? What fills your cup? How do you take care of yourself when you're giving so much, so consistently?
Well, I'm probably not great at it. So I'm going to say that right off the bat. I'm great at giving advice. I'm not so great at taking it for myself. I will say having somebody here. So my husband is very supportive of the things that matter to me. So in terms of the dogs, he's never said no to me bringing home a foster. He's never said, absolutely not, we're not taking that one. At one point, I brought 3 into the house and he still didn't say no to me. He supports that. He takes that load as well. It's not, oh, I brought the fosters into the house, so I am responsible for them. We each do what needs to be done for these dogs. So I think that's a big part of it. Having the time and space for myself to be able to go to the shelter. Your sister's amazing and she does phenomenal things with these dogs. I have a harder time walking into the shelter and really seeing what that space looks like. It's a tough place to be here in Atlanta. I volunteer my time by photographing dogs. So when they come into the shelter, their photos are horrible, they're terrified, and it's never good. So there's a group of volunteers who take the time to photograph dogs to give them hopefully happier, better photos for the website and to get people to see them in what is their true personality most of the time. So with a person smiling, happy, running around, really being able to take that time to do that for me is a big part of my life down here. And it's amazing to think that 6 years ago I probably had never walked into an animal shelter, or hadn't in, I mean, I'm sure a long time, and didn't really understand what that meant. Now I can't imagine my life without that. Being able to do that and see these dogs, see the fosters that I've had find their way into great families and blossom into dogs that can be out in the world, that can play with other dogs, that can walk calmly down the road. It's great to see when those changes happen. And there's some sad moments too. Just like in organ donation, it's not all happy rainbows and sunshine. You just have to keep going and know that for the ones that you're making a difference for, you're making a difference.
I like that your way of giving back to yourself is still by giving to others. But no, I think that speaks very highly of your character and how you operate in the world. Well, thank you, Markie, so much for sharing your story of both the joy and the pain that can come from living donation. Really appreciate it. And thank you
Thank
for all
you.
you're doing for the dogs in Atlanta.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you'd like to learn more about transplantation or becoming a living donor, visit the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois website at nkfi.org. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, and this is The Journey Continues. Prevention is a key part of our mission at NKFI. That's why at the end of each episode, we offer a health or nutrition tip.
Here is today's nutrition tip about dining out. For people living with chronic kidney disease, dining outside of the home or ordering takeout can feel stressful because it can be difficult to navigate the menu for kidney-friendly food options. So how can you enjoy dining out and keep your kidney diet in mind? Do some homework before you order your food or eat at the restaurant. Many restaurants now include nutrition information on their websites or menus to help consumers make healthier for them food choices. Soups, sauces, and salad dressings will likely have added salt, so be sure to check the nutrition information if available before you order. And you can always call the restaurant and ask if it's possible to prepare the menu item you desire without added salt. When you do order, do it with a kidney-friendly plate in mind by ordering a small mixed green salad dressed with oil and vinegar, a steamed vegetable side, a healthy protein that's baked or steamed, and a grain serving. If going with a plant-based protein option like a veggie burger, ask if any preservatives have been added, as these may increase the phosphorus and sodium content. A safe sauce choice for most people following a kidney-friendly diet is olive oil and garlic over rice or noodles. Be sure to keep your portions in check and ask for a to-go container when your food arrives. Put half of your main dish in the container before you even start to eat, or if you're getting takeout, portion out your meal on your own plates instead of eating out of the container. The National Kidney Foundation has a great resource called Dining Out with Confidence for people in CKD stages 1 through 4 and on dialysis. This resource can be found at kidney.org, or you can call the NKFI office for a printed copy to be mailed to you. With today's nutrition tip, I'm Melissa Press, a registered dietitian nutritionist.